Welcome back, everyone, to the weekly Armchair Kickoff. Today, we are here. It is our MMA show, and today I'm joined by a very special guest. I'm joined by Liam Griffin from SBG Cork. Liam, how's it going today?
All very good, man. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks very much, Liam, for coming on. I know yourself, you're doing your own podcast and you're doing your own thing down in SBG as well. So I really do appreciate that you've come on today and you've given us your time to speak to us about combat sports.
No, it's my pleasure.
Thanks very much. Liam, so talk to us just a bit about what led you to combat sports. Like, I know you're in SBG Cork at the moment, and you're doing a great job down there, doing from a coaching aspect down there. You've a lot of top fighters coming out of that gym. Just talk to us kind of about what led you to combat sports and kind of what kind of led you to the coaching aspect of it.
Well, I didn't really have a choice. I grew up in a household where both my parents were karate black belts. So at the age of 7, I was quickly indoctrinated into the sport of Shotokan karate.
Yeah.
Like as a 7-8-year-old, I kind of did the usual beginner classes. Wasn't really my thing at the time. I could take or leave it. I retired at the grand old age of 9, and a couple of years later, I watched the Kickboxer by Jean-Claude Van Damme, and that just reignited something in me. And from that moment on, I said, right, here we go, Dad. I have to come back to karate. I'm making my return. I think I was 12, and kind of progressed from there. And I didn't leave the mat since. I'll be 40 next year, so it's been a long old journey. I did most of my competing in the karate world, doing like sparring and kata, and travel the world. The great thing about being involved in a martial arts discipline is the opportunity to travel the world. I did all of that all through my teens and early 20s. When I got to maybe 2021, there was a documentary on the Discovery Channel called XMA, which stands for Extreme Martial Arts, and it was by one of the main characters in that documentary was a guy called Mike Chattaranthabut, and he was the Blue Power Ranger in the Lightspeed Rescue offshoot of the Power Rangers, and this was all about a kind of basically preparing yourself for the world of action movies, and he kind of created a system of training around that, and I was like, I'm hooked. That's it. I'm off. Yeah. Off I go. Went to Florida, lived in 6 months, did that for a while, came back, started making movies with a collection of friends. And then many years later, after kind of jumping downstairs and doing backflips off walls and all that kind of thing, eventually we kind of, myself and my sister and my mother and father were teaching karate and cardio, kickboxing and fitness classes. We got the opportunity to open up a gym, and at that stage it was like, we cannot, in this day and age, we cannot have a full-time martial arts center without being involved in MMA. And I was a massive fan. I've always been a massive fan of UFC and Pride and like even Glory Kickboxing, all the like the big shows that would have been on late night TV back in the day. And so like we opened up the gym and said, right, let's get this going. And pretty soon after that, I got an opportunity to fight on Cage Warriors, which was ridiculous because I'd never did an MMA class, or I wasn't that good at jiu-jitsu. I had no wrestling, nothing. I wasn't even asked whether I did have anything like that. It was just okay. Cage Warriors in Cork, do you want to fight? And like, hell yeah, I can do this. I can kick fellas in the head. I'll go in, kick some poor sucker in the head, knock him out. Following day, I'll be all over the papers. The gym will be packed, and we'll make a fortune. Kind of like a Del Boy and Trotter story, but didn't quite work out that way. But that was my entry into the world of mixed martial arts, and I was certainly humbled in 2011 in Cage Warriors 42.
So like you came into the Cage Warriors promotion, and like you came from a karate background. So like you're just little to there, like you didn't have any jiu-jitsu and any wrestling background. So you said that was like a humbling experience almost. So like, did that kind of drive you then to kind of to get more skilled in kind of the grappling aspect of the sport and kind of push yourself to kind of reach to higher levels at that point?
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, I knew I needed to learn jiu-jitsu like before that, but I mean, it wasn't until, you know, like the another human just grabs you and just takes complete control and you have no say in the matter. And you know, like I had like grappled with friends of mine, and you know, when you've got a bunch of people that don't know what they're doing, then athleticism comes to the fore, and if you're athletic, you may get on top 1 or 2 times. But when somebody has even 6 months, 8 months, 12 months of jiu-jitsu, you are helpless. If you're a regular human that hasn't done 6 months or more of jiu-jitsu, you are helpless. It's a very, very difficult thing to describe to somebody who hasn't had that experience. But I'd encourage anybody, if you haven't done jiu-jitsu or wrestling before, just go take a class, pick the smallest person in the class, and say bye-bye to your ego, because you are going to get schooled. It is the most humbling experience ever. And like I was already a massive MMA fan and already a massive jiu-jitsu fan, like just watching it. And after that, that was it. That's what I pumped as much of time as I could into afterwards, into developing my own jiu-jitsu and wrestling and trying to figure it out, because I certainly hadn't figured it out in 2011.
Like, even, and the points you've made there, that kind of the grappling aspect of the sport, like it kind of humbles people when they first kind of take part in it. Like, I remember I spoke to Colmar, and your colleague from SBG, on my podcast last week, and he was saying, like, himself, like when he first kind of took part in his first grappling classes, he found also that was kind of a humbling experience as well. And you kind of hear that from fighters across the board at any level. It's like they could be, you know, great. They could be All-Ireland boxers. Next minute, then they go to an MMA gym, and it's a whole different kettle of fish, and it's a humbling experience. And anytime I hear like fighters talk about the grappling aspect of the sport, it kind of gives them kind of extra discipline. Do you know what I mean? They always kind of become more well-rounded as a fighter and more disciplined as a fighter. And it kind of, you know, it humbles them and kind of, you know, makes them more grounded.
Yeah, that's the thing about jiu-jitsu, is that, I mean, you will lose every day multiple times to people all around you. So if you have any sort of ego that's based on you having to be the best at something, it's not going to be there by the end of a class. You know, you're going to have to learn how to deal with adversity. You're going to have to learn how to get off your back, how to be stuck under somebody. And yeah, it teaches you a whole lot of stuff that you just can't get in any other sport.
And like, you know, yourself, obviously you're doing coaching now. So like, in terms of like your coaching approach, like what would be your approach to coaching? Would you kind of have the approach of kind of, if someone needs encouragement, would you kind of wrap the arm around them? Or would it be a case of kind of, it's kind of, your coaching style would be kind of, I suppose, tailored to the fighter, if that makes sense? Would you kind of tailor your coaching to the type of personality and type of fighter it is, or would you have kind of one kind of coaching style?
So like, I have my teaching style, which would be fairly universal, but when it comes to coaching, they're like, those are separate things. There's, I mean, doing is one skill, teaching it is a separate skill, coaching it is a third skill altogether. And so I would be, I suppose, teaching wise, I come from an engineering background, so I'd be very analytical. Coming from karate, we were very technical. Like, karate is a technical sport. There's an awful lot of detail-oriented things going on in karate, and I try and make things fun. Whether people consider them fun or not is subjective, I suppose. But I try and make things fun. So I'd be kind of like laid back, technical, and trying to make it interesting. That would be my teaching style. But then when it comes to coaching, it's different strokes for different folks. I've got fighters that they're their own biggest fans, and their head won't fit through the door, and you have to knock them down a peg or two and keep their feet on in the real world. You know, keep them down, touching reality. And you've got fighters that they could be absolute monsters, and they think they're crap, and you have to build them up. You've got people who, like we say, one of our fighters, Pa Lihan, he's a lightweight fighter. I have to wake him up to go out to the cage every time he fights, because he literally falls asleep during his warm-up. He's so chilled out. And then you've got other fighters, one of his training partners, Abanu Fares, anger management. That kid gets so hyped up that you have to try and calm him down on the way into the cage. So it's like literally a unique approach for every single athlete. And as a coach, then it takes time to develop that relationship with your athlete, that you know what their quirks are, what floats their boat, what makes them perform, what helps to get the best out of them. So yeah, coaching is really an individual tailored approach.
And like in terms of like Joe yourself working with John Kavanagh, like John Kavanagh is like in terms of European mixed martial arts, he's the most recognizable face in European martial arts in terms of kind of a cornerman, in terms of a coach in martial arts. Like how was it to work with someone who was kind of so, and as you said, analytical in the game, like, and how he studies the game? Because I listened to John on a podcast, and he was like, he loves like studying defense. Do you know what I mean? He loves like going like studying grappling exchanges, and kind of what it's like to kind of learn from someone like him.
Yeah, John's been a huge influence in my coaching style and my learning style as well. Obviously, he's my coach as well. I'm still very much a student of the game. And the very first time I had, like, so first off, my very first fight, that fight in Cage Warriors was against one of John's fighters, a great fighter by the name of James Sexual Healing. He's currently living out in Thailand. He's doing the Muay Thai rounds. He's living his dream out there. He fought John Wayne Parr a couple of years ago. So James is a great kid. And John was in his corner that night. So that was my first introduction to John Kavanagh, was him shouting at James as to how to beat me up. So that was a good experience. But a couple of years after that, when we became part of the SBG team ourselves, like from day one, we got like tremendous advice on how to run the gym, how to run our classes, how to teach, who to put up with, who not to put up with, the types of drilling methods that achieve the quickest results. There's so many different things, and even traveling to IMAF tournaments, which would be kind of like the Olympics for MMA, would be the kind of pinnacle of amateur competition. And the first time I went to an IMAF event was 2015 in Birmingham, and John was there. He was cornering Richie Smullen was at that event. Who else was that? Kiefer Crosby. Ben Forsyth actually became the European champion that year. There was a bunch of guys who are now pros who were kind of coming towards the end of their amateur careers at that time. And I just had one fighter at that event. That was Ryan Spillane, and it was only his like second or third fight. It was very, very green at the time. And I was very green as an MMA coach as well. And that whole week, so we were there for a whole week, I just literally just stood right behind John the whole week, and I just watched. I just studied. How did he manage his fighters? What way did he warm up? What was he saying to them as they were on their way to the cage? And I soaked it up like a sponge. And literally every time I'm watching any sort of warm up at any of the events around the country, I'm just trying to take it all in. So yeah, it's been a great experience. It's been a privilege to be able to learn from one of the top coaches in the world.
Yeah, and like what I love about his kind of coaching style, and watching like a Gunnar Nelson fight, or watching a Conor McGregor fight, he's such a calming influence. You see some coaches, like, and I'm not kind of, I suppose, doubting anyone. Mm-hmm. We see some coaches will be shouting at their fighter in their corner when their fighter would be, let's face it, they'd be knackered, they'd be like not in the best of frame of mind. But then John is such like a cool, calm, and collected figure. He gives the right piece of advice. He times it so well, and like he studies it so well. Like I even look at him in the Mayweather fight. I think it was round 4 or 5, and he was saying, pick this shot, pick that shot. He was telling like Conor that about when Mayweather was coming, like he was coming up with the Mexican style at that time, and like John was kind of very quick to it. Like, and Roddy was in the corner as well, but I like the way he's such a calm influence in the corner. It's something I really like, because I have friends who are involved in combat sports in the kind of MMA and the Muay Thai side of things, and I love kind of studying the game anytime I go to an event, and seeing a coach like that kind of take that approach. So it's very refreshing though in that respect.
Yeah, there's as many different cornering styles as there is fighting styles. It's a fascinating subject in itself. One person you should definitely get on this podcast as someone to study in cornering styles is Dino Wade from CMAC in Mulhuddard up near Finglas. He has a serious camp of athletes up there, including his own son and daughter and his wife. But his cornering style is absolutely mental. It's a pleasure to watch, and I've had the pleasure of cornering with him at some of the IMF tournaments as well. I learned a lot from him as well. He's a great man. You should get him on the podcast. He's a ticket.
Definitely. I'll have to get in touch 100%. Liam, like with relation to current mixed martial arts at the moment, and there's a big fight coming up soon, Colby Covington versus Tyron Woodley. Now that is a huge kind of rivalry kind of brewing with the last kind of 3-4 years. Like, what do you make of that fight? Like, who do you think has the advantage coming into this? Obviously, Woodley is coming off the loss against Gilbert Burns, and obviously Covington's after coming off the loss against Usman in a very entertaining fight. Like, how do you down that fight, and who do you think has the advantage coming into this, considering they're both on a loss?
Yeah. No, it's a tough fight. It's a great matchup. It's great time to be a fan of UFC welterweight division, isn't it? I find it hard to pick a winner in this. I'm leaning towards Tyron Woodley. I just think the power he has in his hands. I think their wrestling is quite similar. Their wrestling accolades and abilities, and their style of I think that's possibly going to cancel each other out. And then when it comes to striking, I think Tyron Woodley just has the edge. He has the power, the speed, and the accuracy.
Very explosive.
Yes, absolutely. Colby obviously can strike as well, but I just don't think he has the same level as Tyron there. But it's going to be a great fight, and it'll be good to see which of them comes back around for another shot at the title again. I think both of them will have learned a lot from their last couple of fights. I'm a little bit concerned about Tyron Woodley's mental state. In that, I think he has a little bit of what I'd call like a kind of a blaming mentality when it comes to losing a fight. And I'd be concerned about that if I was coaching or cornering a fighter that had that type of mentality. That would be something I'd really, really focus on. He was blaming a lot on like not being publicized by the UFC as well on like the fact that he was a black fighter, when you obviously have Israel Adesanya, Jon Jones, and who else?
Demetrius Johnson at the time as well.
Yeah, well, Demetrius now wasn't being promoted nearly as much as I mean, if anybody had something to complain about, it was Demetrius Johnson. But I think so he has that kind of blame gene in him, if that makes any sense. That would be something I'd be concerned about. But based on skills and based on this particular matchup, I'd fancy Tyron on this one.
Yeah, I think like Woodley probably has the advantage in the striking aspect 100%. Like, and I think like you see he's very powerful. I think if he lands that one shot on Covington, like especially the fact it was such a devastating kind of way that Usman beat him, maybe it has his chin deteriorated. Like that could be a factor. We just don't know. Another fight I'd like to talk to you about is Khabib against Justin Gaethje. That fight in itself, it's such a contrast in styles. You have Gaethje, who's the absolute brawler, but then you have Khabib, who's just such a specialist grappler. Like he's so like he's brilliant at the whole grappling side of things. Like, how are you feeling about that fight? Because people are saying, like, MMA experts are saying that Gaethje is possibly the one to beat Khabib. Like, do you think he is, or do you think would this be similar to the Poirier fight? Because I feel that's the way it's going to go.
Yeah. Like there's a couple of things to consider here. Is what's Khabib's mental state going to be after the loss of his father? That's going to be a big thing. How because that his father was such a major inspiration in his training, from a discipline point of view, from even just like a lot of times I felt that he was fighting for the pride of his father, so that's an interesting dynamic to put in there. The other thing is that Gaethje does have good wrestling. He does come with a wrestling pedigree. So will he be able to stop the takedowns? Probably not. Mostly because Gaethje's striking style is on the inside, so he's going to have to step in close, which of course plays right into the hands of a wrestler, and particularly a Russian style wrestler like Khabib, where it's just relentless chain wrestling, one after another. They're not shooting for one takedown. They're throwing 4 or 5 takedowns in a row, one after another. So if Gaethje has to be that close to land his power shots, then he's going to have to defend a lot of wrestling. Having said that, we remembered Michael Johnson rocked Khabib with some, I don't know, was it a right hook or a left hook, but he definitely rocked him. He sent him on easy street, and I think Gaethje has far more power than Michael Johnson has. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see McGregor give Khabib a good clean shot, but I think Gaethje may land 1 or 2 that'll make Khabib do the chicken dance, and it'll be interesting to see, can he recover from it then with somebody with a wrestling pedigree who may be able to capitalize and stay on top after that, So my gut says Khabib. I think he's actually good. Yeah, I think Khabib will take this.
Think maybe decision.
Yeah, I don't see Gaethje quitting unless he dies in the cage. I don't see him quitting. I think it'll be a decision. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd be along the lines that I think Khabib grinds a decision. I think that's what you try to do. I think you try neutralize Gaethje. I think you try get Gaethje on his back as much as you can, get him up against that cage, and try to neutralize his striking as best as possible. And now, personally, I'd love to see Gaethje win, and we get a Gaethje McGregor fight, because that for me is just that's on the feet. That's staying on the feet.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And like the exchange is there, like Conor like catch him coming in, like, do you know what I mean? Like I can visualize it now, in that respect, in terms of that'd be a great fight.
Yeah, and I do hope that Conor gets another shot. I think that the Khabib loss came at a time where he was not mentally in the best position himself. I think obviously that's no secret. That's something he spoke about himself. I think he's better than that performance. And I wouldn't like to see Conor retire at this point. I think he has more. I think he has more in him. I think there's a few legacy fights in there, and I think there's a chance for him to go even a step further in terms of greatness as to what he can do. A couple of fights, maybe 3 or 4 more fights, I think would really kind of put him up there in the hall. I mean, he's already going to be in the Hall of Fame, of course, but I think
on the Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, I think so. I think I hope he gets the opportunity to do that. I hope they reach their negotiation or whatever stalemate they are in money talks. I hope they get through all of that, and the matchups come thick and fast in 2021. There's no more pandemics or any of that. I hope he does.
So that does come back, absolutely. Just on the point of Conor McGregor, you've seen Nick Diaz and Nate Diaz are both proactively coming back. It's been kind of announced in the last week. If you had a choice, would you like to see the trilogy against Nate, or would you like to see maybe Conor go up against Nick Diaz? Like, do you think that would be, like, in terms of this, would you like to see the trilogy or Nick?
I'd be happy with either. The only thing is, I think those are kind of. I think right now Conor should be focused on getting back to that lightweight title, and I think those both the Diaz fights are, like, let's say if he can get back to having the strap again, and then he moves up to welterweight permanently, there's time for that. I think those are kind of like dream matchups, but not really necessarily getting him any closer to a title shot.
Belt,
I think there's people above him that he needs to knock off the list. Gaethje being one, obviously Khabib. I think the Tony Ferguson fight is probably going to need to happen at some point as well. Poirier again, like those fights there, I think are more important, and then we can wait. I don't think the Diaz brothers are going anywhere.
Yeah, another kind of fighter I'd like to talk about is Jon Jones. He's obviously after relinquishing his light heavyweight title, and looks like probably Dominic Reyes is going to dominate that division. Now, I'd say, I foresee that he's going to dominate that division. So I don't see anyone else below him who can maybe beat him. But in terms of Jon Jones, moving up to heavyweight, what would you like to see? Would you like to see him maybe fight Stipe straight away for the belt, or maybe you'd like to see kind of an impromptu fight against Francis Ngannou first? Like, what would you personally like to see? What would be your preference?
Yeah, I'd like to see the Ngannou fight first. I think that okay, I know he's coming up as a light heavyweight champion, but I think that there are other heavyweights there that have earned their place in the top 3, top 5, and you know, I think he'd be skipping the queue there. Now I know it's a super fight. I know it's a champion versus champion fight, and most likely that's probably what's going to happen. I think maybe Ngannou is going to be skipped over. I'm not sure. Have they announced a fight on that yet? But yeah, I think like that. And thing as well is that Ngannou's coming around for a second crack. So like putting him against Jon Jones would like, if he can get by Jon Jones and derail that hype train, then 100% you can't deny Ngannou is the next person. But the fact that he already lost and lost fairly decisively against Stipe, I'm not sure the fight would go any differently, to be honest. Ngannou has a very, very wild style, and if he doesn't knock you out in the first few exchanges, as we saw with Stipe in the first fight, Stipe dragged him into deeper waters, and you know, put him up against the fence where his power was neutralized. And I think he already has his number. You know, I'm not so sure that Ngannou has developed anything new. The last fight he had against Rosenstrike, that was literally whoever landed the first punch was going to knock the other one out. There was very little skill in that. That was just 2 wild men swinging for the fences, and Ngannou just happened to be the one that landed first. So, yeah, I think let's put Ngannou versus Jon Jones and build the heavyweight title fight. Give Jon Jones a chance to settle into his new body if he's packing on some extra mass. Let's see him put under like the severe pressure like of a real knockout artist. We haven't seen him how to deal with that in the light heavyweight division. It's always kind of like tall, rangy, you know, strikers who are equivalent power to him. But like Ngannou is a different level of power.
He's different kettle of fish. He is.
Yeah, so that would be an interesting matchup, and I think it would really set up. I think isn't Stipe dealing with an injury as well? Isn't he?
Yeah, since the Cormier fight. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, that's the way I would put it anyway. I don't think Cormier is interested in another fight, is he? Or is he looking for that Brock Lesnar fight? I can't remember now at this stage.
He was talking to Ariel Helwani the other night, and he said like, look, he's retired, but like if Brock Lesnar is recently free agent from the WWE at the moment, so like if that fight opened the door, I'd say Cormier, you know, because he's a big wrestling fan as well. So if they offer that to him, I'd say he'd probably come out of retirement.
100%, and he deserves a big money fight like that. I mean, that would be huge money. That would be his retirement fund. You know, almost doubled. I'd imagine. You know, and I mean, like Brock Lesnar doesn't deserve a title shot, so he shouldn't even be in the picture. It'd be a perfect fight for Daniel Cormier. Go fight Brock Lesnar. If Brock Lesnar wins, then maybe you put him in the top 5 or top 3 or whatever, and let him work his way back up. But yeah, don't muddy up the real top 3 picture or the real top of the division with Brock Lesnar at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Liam, just I suppose in terms of another combat sports topic, Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua verbally agreed a couple of months ago to fight. Now, obviously, Deontay Wilder is injured at the moment, and looks like that fight might be on the back burner. Like, how do you think that fight plays out? Because obviously, if Joshua was like, I suppose, a very kind of rigid style and kind of rigid jab, like when you have Tyson Fury, then who's kind of such a more well-rounded fighter, like he can fight on the front foot, he can fight in the back foot, like he's so elusive. Like, how do you see that fight going?
Well, we're stepping outside my area of expertise here now. I admire I admire boxing and the skills they have got, but I certainly wouldn't be able to give you an educated comment on this. I'm a great fan of Tyson's movement. I think he moves really, really well for a heavyweight. I've got a heavyweight as well, so I'm always watching some kind of highlight reels and kind of clips of Tyson to see how does he move that well. But in terms of, if I was to give you any sort of guess, it would literally just be that, a guess. I wouldn't be an expert in that field at all, and I would only be insulting boxing fans by giving you any sort of feedback on that.
Oh, stop. So like with relation to like Adesanya against Costa, like I think that this fight is so similar to kind of the Gastelum Adesanya fight, because like Costa is kind of very explosive, kind of similar to what Kelvin Gastelum would be, but he's a lot bigger than Kelvin Gastelum. Like I only watched the Kelvin Gastelum Adesanya fight again this morning because it was up on the UFC's YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And I watched it I rewatched it, and at the time, like Gastelum did light Adesanya up. Like he really did. Now Adesanya, obviously he got the better of him in the end, but like, do you feel if maybe Costa catches Adesanya, do you maybe think that it might be a different situation what the Gastelum fight was?
I was thinking that the more similar fight would be the Yoel Romero fight. I think that, you know, the explosive, the big bodybuilder style physique explosion. You know, Kelvin Gastelum came up from welterweight, so he was always a bit shorter. You know, now phenomenal athlete and arguably did better at middleweight than he did at welterweight. But there's no doubting Costa comes with like dynamite in under the gloves. You know, anything that lands there is going to do severe damage to anybody. It doesn't matter whose chin is behind that punch. It's going to do some damage. The thing with Adesanya is that he's so elusive with his movement, and he's so experienced with the scores of kickboxing matches he's had down through the years, that it's the distance. It's not about hitting guys like Israel Adesanya. It's hitting them flush, and he's got such experience that just the slightest chin roll here or shoulder roll here or just a pull back there would take the majority of the sting out of most of the punches that you'd land on him. If Costa can land flush, he's gone. He's out. But that's way easier said than done. I think Izzy has just got that kind of almost that Matrix style kind of bullet time reflex where, you know, and it's not that he doesn't get hit, it's that he doesn't get hit flush. You know, so
yeah,
I would be erring towards Izzy on this one.
Yeah, I think if I had to put money on it, I'd say Adesanya. But as you said, like if Costa catched him flush, like it could be good night, like, do you know?
Yep, and that's true for anybody.
So Liam, Sorry,
no, that I'd say that's true for anybody. Costa hits. He's a tank. He's an absolute animal of a human.
I think I've just lost you there, Liam.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, 100%.
Perfect. So what were you just saying there about Costa?
Yeah, he's just a tank of a human. Like anything he hits is going to die. Do you know? But again, as long as he hits flush.
Yeah, absolutely. Liam, just one final one for you with relation to kind of your own plans for kind of mixed martial arts and kind of combat sports in general. Do you have anything planned now? Kind of we're coming towards a time where fights are upcoming. I know there's Muay Thai events and I know there's MMA events coming up. Cage Warriors is over in Manchester this weekend as well, coming as well. Like, do you have any kind of future plans for your own fighters or yourself? Or
yeah, we've got a busy few months ahead of us. One of like a lot of my guys are fighting in the Halloween Havoc card in Cage Legacy and in the Red Cow. We've got a couple of lads fighting kickboxing at the end of this month. Young Fufu Farris is fighting for a 61 kilo junior K1 title. Fufu Farris is the Irish Israel Adesanya. He moves very, very similar style to him. Very, very slinky, very very smooth striking style. So I'm looking forward to that fight. He's looking in great shape. We have his older brother, Abanu Fares. He's fighting on the Halloween Havoc card, October 30th in the Red Cow in Dublin. I have Dylan Donovan, Ryan O'Connor, both fighting on that card also. Who else have I got? I've got Fionn Hickey fighting in the December card in Cage Legacy. Pali Han is fighting for the lightweight title. He's fighting Alexander O'Sullivan from CMAC. That's a phenomenal fight. The thing about the amateur scene in Ireland over the last few years, with all of the athletes traveling abroad to the IMAF championships and getting so many fights under their belt against like high quality international wrestlers, grapplers from all over the world, Some of the amateurs that are coming towards the end of their amateur career at the moment are just phenomenal. And there's a huge anticipation around this fight between Pa Lihan and Alexander O'Sullivan, two of the top lightweights in the country. Pa is already the featherweight Cage Legacy title holder. He's got a super lightweight title from Extreme Combat in the UK. So he's coming for that middle title now, the lightweight title. And Alex is an absolute champ. I've helped Dino corner Alex for years at IMAF tournaments. Massive Alex O'Sullivan fan. He's a great kid, huge future ahead of him. And Pa is absolutely honored to take this fight. And he's asked for this fight a couple of times because, they both have such a mutual respect for each other. So that's a great fight. And then I have Ryan the Hulk Spillane is due to make his Bellator debut, hopefully over the next 3 to 4 months. We're just waiting. There's a backlog. It's just a backlog of obviously with the pandemic. A lot of the cards were cancelled for 4 or 5 months, and a lot of the fighters who are more senior than him that would have kind of bigger contracts, they need to get their fights, and they need to get them. They need to clear some of the backlog so that some of the new debut pros can get their shot, and we're just waiting for that call. We're ready to go now.
Waiting in the wings.
Waiting in the wings. He's in great shape. He's just done a 6-week camp with up in Dublin with John Kavanagh. He was helping Johnny Walker get ready for his fight next week against Ryan. No, not can't remember his name. Anyway, big fight in Vegas, and Hulk was there to spar with Johnny Walker for the whole 6 weeks. So he's ready to go. Just give us a name, give us a time, we'll be there.
Absolutely, 100%. I just want to throw out a little shout out to my own friend Eric here. He's fighting for the 65k Muay Thai belt coming soon as well in the next couple of months. So I'm very excited for that fight. Anytime Eric turns up for a fight, it's absolute war. And the fact it's class A-class rules. Yeah. When he fights on them A-class rules, it's just a bloodbath, and I love it every time. Yeah.
It's not for the faint of heart, A-class.
It's not for the faint of heart, not at all. Liam, thanks very much for coming on this evening. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you about combat sports. And look, it's been very good to have you on, because I know you're doing your own podcast, and you gave us the time, so I really do appreciate it. And do you want to give your podcast a shout out to our viewers?
Yeah, sure. My own podcast is probably not in the same niche as this. We kind of do like a kind of a psychology and self-help one. It's called The Fight Coach, The Psychotherapist, and The Gym Mama. It's a podcast I do with my sister Marlene, who's she's the boss of the gym here. She kicks all the lads around into shape and makes sure that they're doing as they're told. And then my brother-in-law Jimmy, he's the sports psychologist in the gym here. He's a counselor and a psychotherapist. So we talk just mad stuff, like mental health, kind of anything at all. It's just a bit of crack for us. But one with the podcast that I think would be more applicable to the audience that maybe you guys share would be Blood and Bandages. That's Paul O'D and David Doran. Two guys who are involved in the gym here, and they're very hyper knowledgeable on all the ins and outs of international and MMA. They know far more about fighter records and stuff than I do. I'd be looking at them sometimes, and they'd be asking me questions, looking for some feedback from me, and I'm like, you guys know more than me about this. So Blood and Bandage MMA, it's up on all the same channels. It's actually hosted on Buzzsprout, just like yours is. So I think you guys would probably do well to kind of do some sort of a kind of a cross episode. Maybe they bring you onto their podcast and you come across to theirs. And I think both sets of listeners would actually enjoy each other. Good chemistry there.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely something that we should definitely do in the future. Liam, thanks very much for coming on. Have a great evening.
You too, Matt. Thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure, and best of luck with the podcast and in the future.
Thanks very much, Liam. Much appreciated. Cheers. Thank you.